Okay, let's bring the meeting back to order. All right, we're going to start with the opening work session. As you have on your agenda, the first discussion has been pulled from the right-of-way agreement. So we're going to postpone that till later. So now we're going to discuss the purchase of 810 2nd Street, Delmar. Apparently, Mr. Miller's not here.
He was earlier.
Yeah, he was here.
I don't know if he's downstairs or left, but he was here earlier, but I don't see nobody up there now.
All right. Ms. Hurley, have you heard from Mr. Miller?
Steve, he's probably in the county executive's office. Let me go grab him.
Okay. Does anybody have any discussion on that before he shows up?
Well, do we want to pay more than it's appraised for? I guess that's a good question.
That is a good question.
I don't like paying more. It's everybody, it seems like everybody gets a chance. They always want to stick it to the county.
The only comment I'll make to that, I did call Doug Marshall. John, you asked about that. I called Doug, I just called him to ask him about the property or whatever. But he made the comment that he had to do, like, he's got, I forget what he said, I've got, Doug just called me, he said, I've got 39,000 in this or something like that. He said he had to do clearing when he bought it. He has a loan against it. So he's paying a loan.
Maybe he paid too much.
Steve, you can sit up front here.
That's what people tell me when I go to sell a car and I ask him something for it. I say, oh, I got so-and-so in it. They said, well, you paid too much.
Steve, we're talking about the property in Delmar on 810 2nd Street, and the
Yes,
question came up about how much to pay for it, but we'll get to that, so go ahead and start if you would.
Sure.
Introduce yourself and
Sure.
for the record.
Steve Miller, Director of Wicomico County Recreation Parks Tourism. So thank you for your time today. I'm here to talk about a possible land acquisition in the town of Delmar. The county, as you know, owns the Mason-Dixon Athletic Complex in Delmar. Approximately a year ago, we were able to purchase 2 parcels in Delmar to include as part of that athletic complex. And we were able to build an additional ball field for additional recreation activity. At the time, there was a third lot that was not for sale. And so we purchased the 2 lots to help with parking and to do other things for increased activity in Delmar.
Yes.
So since that time, this third lot has now become available. And so we're here to ask the council to consider a request to acquire that property. As far as the funding goes, the bulk of it would be covered by program open space, the state funding source. There would be a small out-of-pocket cost for the county, which would be approximately $4,000. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. But we view this as a real opportunity both for the county and for the residents on the north side of the county.
What would you do with that piece of land?
So I think there's a number of opportunities. If we are able to acquire it, what I'd like to do is to engage the public up in Delmar and to get ideas. I don't think we're under a rush as far as what to do, but I think 3 opportunities that we see. One is to continue to address the parking issues. I think what we acquired last year has started that and has helped. So I think you could look at additional parking. You could look at additional ball fields. I think that could be a consideration. And whether that's diamond fields or a rectangle, like soccer type field. And thirdly, the building, if you're familiar with Delmar, the concessions and restroom building is quite old in Delmar. And there's talks about replacing that. And one of the thoughts could be, do you relocate that to this new piece of land? If that's where your parking is going to be, if you're going to replace that anyway, do you maybe relocate that and have that be more central? So I think there are options. I think what we would want to do is engage the public, engage the town before we decide that. But certainly I think we would have options at our disposal, and it could be a real opportunity for us.
Yeah, I coached Little League many years, and every year during All-Stars, I'd have my team play Delmar, and we had to park alongside the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
And for the kids crossing the road, that always scared me. And then if you're not paying attention, letting kids run, they may go play on the railroad tracks and a train comes by. I've always been concerned about that as well.
Yeah.
I've seen kids get killed locally by trains. So if we could find parking away from that, I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, and we're residents of Delmar, so I see it up close with my own boys that play over there. And I think getting that parking over there helps move all that traffic as far as the flow away from the railroad tracks. It also has helped the Board of Education, the elementary schools across the street, so some of their staff, we've entered into kind of a mutual use of that space, so it helps the school as well, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see it as a real win for the county.
So this is across from the school,
Yes, sir.
so it's not really close to the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks is further in town.
Correct.
Yeah, so this
The
property.
railroad track's on the other side.
Yeah, the railroad track's on the other side, but traditionally, people have used the railroad tracks for parking. So by getting the two lots we got last year, and then this in addition, would move the parking away from the railroad tracks over.
By the school.
Right.
Let me ask a question. How come the property wasn't available a year ago? Any particular reason?
I don't know. It was owned privately by a gentleman who then sold it to Marshall. So we had tried to reach out to that gentleman when we were acquiring the other two, and there was no response from him.
I
So-
just thought it was kind of unusual. You know, we try to purchase a property, we can't buy it, and this is no reflection on you at all.
Sure.
We can't purchase it. 6 months later, he purchased it, he sells it to Marshall, who normally when someone is buying a piece of property, they buy it with the intent of something. Either you're gonna put a house on it, or you're gonna put something on it. But it appears to me that, from what I can tell, and I really don't know, it appears to me the only reason the property might have been purchased was speculation, possibly even knowing that the county wanted to buy it, purchasing it in December, turning around 6 months later and being quite available to sell it. I just thought that things just didn't seem to
Yeah, I mean, I
add
can't,
up.
I don't know the intentions of why that was purchased, so I can't speak to that.
And even the 4,000, even as it being appraised 4,000 above, you know, he's gonna be making about 13% profit on his investment there. What he's asking for is with the additional 4,000, he's gonna get a 36% profit in 6 months. I just don't see how it's justifiable to pay him the additional $4,000 for what he's looking for, just me personally.
Sure.
Does the county negotiate the price?
Yeah, so I don't do that directly, but the negotiation was handled through the law office and the exec's office, so
Okay,
I wasn't involved with that directly.
okay.
So, yeah.
So that is the price, the 38,000, because some people are concerned that they're paying 4,000 too much.
Sure, yeah, what we were told is 38 was the price, and that he wouldn't move off of that. The 34 would be covered by the state grant, so the 4 would be out-of-pocket county funding, which we could absorb through Recreation and Parks, would be our intent.
Okay. Any more comments?
No, I think it's a wise choice to buy it because of where it's at.
I agree.
I told John this morning, you know, the old farmer says, I don't want all the land, I just want the piece next to me.
Right.
But I don't think the old farmer would pay more than it's worth.
Right.
You know, or what it's appraised for.
Right.
So I have a problem, like John mentioned, and 4,000 over the appraised value. I'd be all right if we paid the highest, what is the highest appraised value, 35?
I believe it was 35 and 33 was,
Yeah, average of 34. I
Right.
mean, and I know $3,000 isn't a lot, but it would be, that's my feelings, you know.
Any,
I'm sorry?
was somebody saying something?
No.
Feedback or call.
Oh,
What, I guess one question is.
Mr.
what if-
McCain.
What if the seller says, I'm not gonna sell it then?
I guess we wouldn't own it. I mean, we've never had it before, so it's not like,
The last, it's not that piece, that last,
it's,
and that whole block, that's the last piece.
right.
but it's also, I mean, we've never owned it before, so it's not like that, we're gonna miss something that we didn't have. It's not like they're taking away from us.
Right, yeah, we certainly survive without it.
Yeah.
I think it, like you said, adjacent property is always a unique opportunity that we may or may not get again. What we were told was that was take it or leave it price. So, yeah, I think what I'd like to see, I understand the concern about the cost, but being the bulk of this is state grant funded, would certainly like to see this happen. But
Yeah, because I think it is a good point. You know, at the end of the day, counties, whether it's 3,000 or 4,000 they're paying or whatever, that's all the county's having to pay for, whether it's 35, 38 or whatever, they're getting it for $3,000 or $4,000.
correct.
So that's
That we get to do what we want with it,
right.
Correct.
as long as it pertains to Parks and Rec.
Little
Correct,
League sent us, I saw that email from
Yeah.
this morning.
Yeah, so the president of the Little League did send an email out today, earlier today, just saying that they support the purchase of the property.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Cannon, if you were going to purchase property,
Can you
Eh.
take your mask down?
okay,
It's really muffled.
if you were going to purchase a property, would the mortgage company give you higher than the appraised value?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of times, when people are trying to buy homes, the real chink in the armor comes when they want to borrow so much, but then the appraiser says, I'm sorry, but it's not worth that much.
Yeah.
And immediately lose the loan because of that. I just think, I just think we're being held at gunpoint, and I really do. There's no reflection even on the seller. He's trying to take advantage, I think, of the situation. If I were buying that and I walked into someone and said, here's what I'd like to do, and he said, here's what I want, I wouldn't buy it.
I would say that at some point in time, it might get cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if he really wants to sell it.
Could go down in price.
Is there a possibility somebody might want it, even though it's surrounded by public fields?
I don't know. I mean, it's been there a long time, so I can't speak to that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But, I mean, it's possible, but we also run the risk that it may not be there, and like you said, we're no worse, but I think, a lost opportunity is not a good thing in my view, but,
Yeah, I'll just share this comment. We tell all our clients, if something's for sale, it's adjacent to you, you buy it within reason. You buy it. Because that opportunity only comes along so often.
Yep, you're right there. I agree with you.
So what does what's the council want Mr. Miller to do?
I'd say go back and offer 35, the highest appraised. What do you think, John?
Yeah, that's a good compromise, Joe. I really do. First of all, I wouldn't want to pay above 34, but honestly, if they've got an appraisal of 35, go with 35.
Can we give him the authority to, like I say, go for the 35 at the end of the day? If he,
I'd just say
if he can't
35.
get it,
Just
Do
say-
the best.
We're sitting here, this is a public meeting, we're sitting here saying that, the guy's gonna know.
That's
You know,
true.
Okay, here's my cards.
When we had to buy that property, well, not when we had, but when we bought the property on the west side there that we've never used since, similar circumstance came up, and the council did not want to pay the full value of what they were looking for, and actually made an offer quite a substantially less amount, and they accepted it. I know that when Tri-County first was looking at buying this building here, did the same thing. Mike Pennington came to us and said, well, here's what it's being appraised at, and we said, go in there and ask him this. And he goes, is that firm or not? We said, yeah, it's firm. Ask him for this. And he actually went in and he got that amount. So it's not as if it'll go away. I just think that,
but they were also properties that were the millions of dollars.
Mr. McKean, if you can speak into the mic.
These were properties that we were the millions of dollars on, not,
the numbers,
we're talking 3,000, 4,000
the
here.
number we negotiated was substantially less.
Right, but still, it was,
Huge numbers.
these were $1 million properties. We're talking, I'm just concerned, we're being like penny wise and pound foolish here. It's the last remaining site in that whole block.
I've
So
never
it's a
really liked the phrase when someone says, well, it's only $4,000. Yeah. $4,000 to me means a lot, as much as it may have done to the average person on the
Doesn't
street.
mean to me what it means you're getting a 35, whether it's $35,000 or $38,000 property for 4,000. To me, that's not a lot.
It's not our money we're spending, it's the taxpayers' money.
It's true.
So does Mr. Miller have the authority to go back to the seller and ask if if he'll take the appraised value?
Well,
No, I
no,
think they ought to go back to the seller and say, that's what we'll pay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
not what they'll take.
yeah, the highest appraised value of 35,000 is what the recommendation was from Councilman Holliday and Holloway, yeah, Holloway, and Mr. Cannon. Anybody else?
Agree with that?
Well, do you need to vote on that or something? I mean,
Well, we can't, it's a work session, but we can get a consensus.
Consensus.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that, I think.
I agree with that.
I'd say overall, it is an important property. I don't know what it's zoned. I'm assuming it's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't look like it's probably going to go anywhere. I do definitely hear, Mr. Cannon, and we want to make sure, and Mr. Holloway, want to make sure you're using taxpayer dollars as efficiently and effectively as possible. But at the same time, it's also a minor amount of money. I do want to make sure that we secure this property. Overall, I don't have any strong feelings. I probably defer to the Parks and Recs folks there.
You know, baseball's always been big to me, and I think we need that property, especially if we're going to consider putting a field there or somewhere close by. So, is the consensus to offer 35?
That's where I'm at. How many other people are there?
What'd you say?
That's how I feel.
1, 2, 3. I agree with 35. At least try that.
Okay. So what would we would do that, and then I guess recontact the council as far as the
Come back
our
to
next
us.
step. Okay.
It's not gonna be there's no big rush either, you know, so.
No, not particularly. Okay.
I do have one quick question. For the grant, have you guys already been awarded the grant money?
No, so we've started that process. So there's a process that goes through the Board of Public Works. So we've started that process of approvals, but it's not been approved or awarded at this point. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, but no, not officially yet.
Have you been given a go-ahead?
Yeah, I mean, they've initiated the process, so
Yeah.
we just wanted to keep both processes moving.
So you're pretty confident that we'll get that grant?
I don't have any reason to think not. Yeah.
Okay.
We did for the other two lots, so
Okay.
I would think it would be the same.
All right.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
How you coming on your parking stuff?
For Delmar?
No, your parking at the
Civic
electrical
Center.
poles.
Oh.
Sorry, you're done.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I think we need more time on that. That's why we'd ask to postpone that.
That's fine.
And I think maybe we could revisit that. So, very good.
Yeah, just let us know when you're ready to come back with that project as well.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, pay and classification plan. Ms. Curry was invited to be here, to the Director of Human Resources. Per Bob Culver, the Human Resources Director, nor anyone from administration will be attending this work session. The budget bill has a provision that changes to the classification plan that are shown in the FY21 budget and are not approved by the council. The internal auditor has provided a list that contains position title changes and pay grade changes that are different than what was shown in the fiscal year 20 budget in comparison to the fiscal year 21 budget. It is our attorney's position that these changes should be submitted separate from the budget bill for the council's approval. So that's where we stand.
What was the reason for them not coming to explain this? Was there a reason given, or?
Well, Mr. Culver sent a letter, and I'll read it to the county council. Dear County Council President and members, this letter is in reference to the June 16th, 2020 open work session, number 3, titled Pay and Classification Plan. This letter is to be read as a matter of record during the work session. During the June 2nd, 2020 council meeting regarding the annual budget and appropriation bill, Mr. Robert Taylor, the county council's special counsel, made allegations that the pay and reclassification process was not adhered to by the executive administration. Mr. Taylor misled council with an analysis of classification changes prepared by the county's internal auditor, and neither party presented any questions, inquiries, or concerns to the executive staff throughout the budget process.
They didn't show up.
I know it. To respond to Mr. Taylor's June 2nd, 2020 comments, reclassifications on occupied positions are submitted concurrently, he quoted that, concurrently with the budget proposals MPPP 409A, while Mr. Taylor is citing Personnel Manual, MPPP, hereafter, that was established before the executive form of government. Per Article 7 of the Wicomico County Charter, departmental budgets are directly submitted to the county administration/executive for final submission to the county council. These requests are not submitted directly to the county council, nor should they be. Through this process, all reclassifications are processed by Human Resources in accordance with policy and procedures and submitted to me to be incorporated into my budget proposal. I have attached the budget process memo distributed to all departments instructing them to the budget process. These procedures align with other local governments. The list of positions provided to the county council by the internal auditor, also found in the June 16, 2020 council brief book, incorrectly consist of qualifying promotions such as correctional officers and sheriff's deputies are based on certification and years of experience in the position. This has been adopted in the reclassification system for decades. Next, the head of the Department of Human Resources is by county charter exempt from classification system 601 by the Wicomico County Charter and 104 of the MPPP. Part-time, seasonal, and grant positions are exempt from classification system 104 of the MPPP. Finance consists of promotions from retirements and separations. The titles that were already established or adopted within the classification system 602 of the Wicomico County Charter and 1018 of the MPPP. Positions were titled correctly to align with duty jobs and with titles already established in the adopted classification system. The jobs established in the Wicomico County classification system has been a result of several compensation studies. Furthermore, Mr. Taylor advised the council to approve amended legislation to the budget bill referencing the classification issue without communication with the executive's office. These actions are detrimental to county governmental functions, causes uncertainty amongst the employees, and negatively impacts the public perception of the county government operations. Regardless of the issue, the public is beginning to frown upon the unnecessary controversy between branches, and it needs to stop. As a Wicomico County executive, my responsibility is to oversee these operations without continuous interference. 314 of the Wicomico County Charter. I am committed to my oath to serve this community and work in the best interests of the county. The executive staff will not participate in work sessions based on inaccurate analysis and unauthorized actions. I am more than happy to work with any of you to accomplish our goals and serve the citizens of Wicomico County, but you need to place your efforts on working with me, not against me. Respectfully, Bob Culver, County Executive. So,
Mistakes on the agenda.
what's that?
Mistakes on the agenda, we can go, you're not gonna talk about it, are we?
Right.
Can't do nothing. So
We all
let's
got
go.
that email. I'm not sure
Yep.
where you just read it. We
Let's go to the next,
sent it all.
Yenny refuses to attend.
let's go to the next item.
Any more comments?
Well, I think it's important, and the reason it's on our agenda is because it is important.
It is.
You don't change pay and classification plans through the budget. You do it through resolutions. And that's all we're requesting, is for the HR director to be here in cooperation with the county council to discuss this plan, since that is our responsibility.
And that's
So,
why they were requested to be here.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with trying to get into any type of conflict with the executive branch. We're just trying to get a department head in front of us to go over the pay and classification plan, because it's very clear from what Mrs. Hurley supplied to us in her information through email, that several issues in the budget just reclassified titles and positions. You just can't do that in the budget. So we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page on how we were going to structure the county's business and the county's affairs. So I don't understand the reason for any type of attacks against the county council as a whole, and we'd really just love to have a department head sitting in front of us when we have business that we'd like to address. So it's still an open issue, is not Mrs. Hurley, where we do need to come to
Well-
some conclusion on how we want to do this?
I think that's actually more of a legal question. Mr. Taylor added a whereas paragraph to our budget bill that said that none of these changes were approved by council. So my question to him would be, if council took no action, does that mean none of those changes were legally made in the budget?
Well, what the personnel manual says that Mr. Culver didn't bother to refer to is that it's 0411, section, I guess that is, evaluation of positions for classification by the Human Resources Director will be presented to the Administrative Director and the County Council for final decision. And then the next, 0412, the County Council shall approve or disapprove all changes and requests for reclassification of positions. So regardless of whether it's a new position to be classified or an existing one to be reclassified, the council has the final word. And Mr. Cannon, I believe, is correct completely when he says we don't do this in the budget, that there's nothing in the charter talking about reclassification of positions. Now, there is, in a earlier portion of the personnel manual that Mr. Culver does refer to, and that's 0408, requests for new positions shall be made concurrently with budget proposals for the ensuing year. Requests must identify estimated budget year cost requirements to fund the position and must be accompanied by a position analysis questionnaire form, and there's a particular form number for it, outlining the duties and responsibilities of the position. And none of that has been submitted for any of these positions. I'm referring, I think, to the ones that are on Mr. Hitchens' list that he prepared of, maybe a couple dozen or so positions. And in particular, since it's a very significant amount of money, the budget officer position that is in the budget this year for $128,500, which happens to be the same salary that's in the budget for the finance director. Now, there's no discussion of what that position entails. The notion that, well, you can tell what it entails from the title, I don't think holds water. And so in effect, as I said, in the whereas clause that I suggested, there are things in the budget that haven't been approved by the proper manner. And I guess that's my sin in Mr. Culver's view.
I think he made reference to you a couple times. Did you address both of them?
I think they all kind of revolve around that same thing, you know.
Okay. Any?
I would say I didn't have anything to do with drawing up the list of positions. I didn't ask anybody to do that. I think it was a good idea because now we know to some extent what the extent of the problem is. But he makes it sound as if I generated all this, and I didn't. Right. I made the comment after I saw the list that this just doesn't seem to, it does not comply with the provisions of the personnel manual. I might also point out that in the charter, it's the county that has responsibility for the personnel system to establish it and make changes in it. So it's not as if you're somehow intervening or trying to supersede the authority of the county executive.
So how are we going to correct the titles as they're now being suggested if we don't have job descriptions of some of the titles? How are we going to do this without
To me, the starter is to get job descriptions and maybe some explanation of why these particular positions are being changed, if they're being changed. That would seem to me to be consistent with the two provisions I read to begin, 4111 and 4112. That's what it says, it's to go to the council for final decision.
I'll tell you, it's a little late now, but if they don't come to us with proper titles and classifications, I don't know how they can justify funding.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things here that, you know, you can open up the law books and not find much precedent on because we're in such an unusual situation.
So I guess the question is, where do we go from here? How are we going to try to at least get some control over this so that we know who's working where and what their title is and what their job description is? I mean, how are we going to do that without the HR director here?
Well, we've already established it's a legal issue, so what do you suggest, Mr. Taylor?
I hate to suggest something just slapdash, so to speak, but I think that some more formal analysis and action is needed. I mean, I'm at a loss right now to say what that is, and I might talk to Mr. Hitchens and Ms. Hurley and put our heads together and maybe come up with some suggestion for you, but it just looks to me like there's a lot that's out of whack that's going on here.
And we're paying for positions that aren't even approved yet.
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, I'm not saying that anybody in any of those positions is not doing a good job, is not needed. I'm not saying anything of that kind. But in terms of the approval and classification of the positions, that is certainly, in my view, out of whack. There's just, it's not in conformance with the personnel manual.
It also has to do with the amount we're getting paid, right?
Well, it could, yes, it could, because it would depend to some extent on what the position entails and what the salary is,
Right.
whether it's reasonable or not.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not as conversant with the salary plan, the Singer studies and all, and exactly how somebody progresses in that. So I don't want to suggest that anybody is getting overpaid or underpaid. I just don't know. But certainly in terms of the classification provisions, that hasn't been conformed.
All right. Any more comments?
Yeah.
All right, we need to know where to go from here, so.
I guess the only thing we can do is send a request for these titles, these positions, reason for why they're changing the title or the classification, and if it's a new position, to supply us with the job description.
There are a couple of things in the charter that might be, they're kind of ways that we might go, give us some leverage. One is the council does have the ability to subpoena information, subpoena power, that's section 906. The council also has the power to assign duties to people in the executive branch. There's a provision in there for that. I don't have it right in front of me right this minute, but it allows the council to do that. And that would not be in violation of the provision that's also in the charter about interfering with the executive branch. In other words, you have the ability to do certain things with the people in the executive branch under this particular charter provision, as well as subpoena information. So, I mean, as far as getting the job descriptions, or what that form I referred to a few minutes ago, the position analysis questionnaire form, I mean, I would think we could try asking for it. If you don't get it, either do a PIA or do a subpoena for everything. I mean, it's information. There's also a section that says the county executive will provide to the council any information that they ask for in the pursuant to do their duties, to do what you all do. And so there are several sections in the charter that we can use.
None of that's worked for the past 6 years. Why do you
Well,
expect it to work?
the only thing I can say is it's there, and, you know, give it a shot. And, you know, if it doesn't work out, that's one more log on the fire.
So what happens if the council doesn't act on this?
Well, I mean, maybe we can talk about that in closed session coming up, but it seems to me that if he's violating the charter, there's pretty good grounds there, you know. But you have to get it, you have to go through the motions, you have to establish it.
Okay. We can talk about that in closed work session. Anything else?
I just want to point out that the chapter 4 that's in the briefing material is the current chapter that's in the personnel manual that is posted on the county's intranet. This is what all employees or at least they're provided with a CD, I think, or they're directed to the internet to take a look at that. So this is current, even though she said he said in his letter that it was, outdated. It was done prior to the executive form of government. That may be true, but this is what we currently have right now in our personnel manual.
Well, also, wasn't the personnel manual reviewed pretty much in 2010? What they call the 2010 revision?
Well, this says revised August 4th, 2010.
Yes, there were some revisions
Yeah, so, and
since
that
then.
was after we switched to the county executive form of government, so I did notice
Right,
in there, he
2006
made some
was-
comment like, well, this is from before we went to the county executive system. Well, some
That's
of the
correct.
language, true, may be, but it's been revised and readopted since then, so
That's
it's
correct.
not exactly like it's from ages ago.
But didn't the council want to do the
I
personnel?
can't hear you.
Didn't the council want to do the personnel manual?
We had been working on it. Don't know if we'd get any assistance with that or not. We could put in a request for that as well. All right, anything further? We can finish the discussion in closed work session, but if there's nothing else, let's move on. Next on the agenda is proposed funding grant legislation. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, because of the spotlight to some extent on grants and how they're approved or not approved, I've been asked to, and I have proposed some revisions to the part of the county code. It's in chapter 29, the Article 2, which deals with grant funds and how they're
Can you speak
accepted.
up?
You can't hear? Okay,
No,
sorry, yeah.
You're talking very softly.
And how they're accepted, the two manners in which they're done, either by putting them in the budget bill. There's a list, in fact, you'll see it in this year's budget. There's a list of what they call anticipated grants and anticipated grant revenue. And then there are all the other grants, which are generally referred to as unanticipated grant revenue, that come in. And the grants that we did today regarding the circuit court fall into that latter category. They were not in this year's budget bill. I'm talking about the 2020 budget bill. And in fact, they didn't come in until within the last 30 or 60 days. And there's two different, so they can't be adopted in the initial budget bill because there's of the timing. So there's a provision for that. What I've done, I've gone through and tried to, I think, clean this up a little bit. I've maintained this same twofold nature, anticipated, unanticipated, but I've provided for a lot more information to be provided to the county council in both cases, and provided that, here we go again, the county, suggested provision, the county executive shall furnish to the county promptly upon request such other documentation regarding a grant as council may request, including correspondence between the county and the source of the grant or its representative or agent. So if you want information and it's not provided initially, you can ask for it. It also suggests, and not suggests, but actually requires, that when a request comes in, that you're going to get the basic supporting information. We had to ask for that for these grants to the circuit court. I think that they should be given right off the top. They can be provided to the county council administrator. If members of the council want to see them, they're fine. Usually, they break down to just maybe a couple of pages. There's a grant for funds that we're going to talk about, I think, a little later, where there's a couple of letters from different grant approval agencies. It's not tons of information normally. If there are references to codes and COMAR, they can just be provided if council wants to look at them. So I don't think we're talking about tons of documentation, but I think it's a good idea to know what the grants are and not just have some general reference to them in a sentence or so. Just like in the grants we did today for the circuit court, I suggested to Ms. Hurley, and she had put in there, the references to the documents that came out of the administrative office of the courts for those monies. In a couple cases, they're MOUs, in a couple cases, they're grant approvals. So that's what I've tried to do with this. I have eliminated the reference, any reference, I think, in here to the finance director. Not because of our particular situation with the finance director or lack thereof at the current moment, but because those matters are basically covered in the charter, and they don't need to be covered here. If we want to change the charter in some way in regard to that, fine, but do it that way. That's pretty much it. I've also provided in there just another one of these communication type items. Council members and the council staff may directly but informally discuss any aspect of a grant with any personnel in the executive branch, either before the anticipated or unanticipated grant revenue is approved or thereafter. Notice the word informally. What the charter provision that Mr. Culver sometimes cites about you can't tell any of us anything, talks about formal discussion. So we're talking about informally. You can ask, why do you think this is needed? How are you going to use it? Things like that, just general questions. And so that's provided in here. So there's a lot more, I guess you would say, maybe automatic isn't the word, but a legalized transparency, let's put it that way.
Mr. Taylor, could
So
we?
hopefully we won't keep getting these cold shoulders.
Exactly.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I thought you were done. But can we put something in there that they need to keep us informed every 3 months, 6 months of how this grant process is going? I mean, I know there's other departments that are receiving grants and have had to pay them back to the state. So,
Well,
I don't know about this one particularly, if they would have to, if they have measurable goals they have to submit.
Just a thought on that might be to put something in there that in its approval, I'm not sure if I have anything in there right now at the moment that would cover this, but if I don't, put something in there to the effect that when you all approve a grant, that you can put conditions on it such as that. Because you might not want to do it for every grant. I mean,
Okay.
there are a lot of grants that are pretty rote,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, and they every year, same thing. And not a whole lot of need for oversight. On the other hand, they're the other end of the spectrum, and that's where you might want to do it. So I think I have something in there about conditions. Laura, do you remember? Yeah, she's
Yeah, I vaguely
nodding her
remember
head.
that,
Yeah,
yeah, but it's in
I
here.
can't put my finger on it right now because it's been a little bit time since I did this, but I think there's a provision in there, and if there's not, we can certainly put something in there. I assume there's no objection to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Hurley, can you mention your conversation with Mr. Wilbur?
Sure. So, the issue with asking for a lot of the grant documentation is the time in which the grant needs to be accepted. There's normally like a certain time period, you're talking about 10, 14 days. So the concern there was that this would, with council asking for the additional documentation, it may slow down that process and put us up against that time window in order to actually accept the grant funds.
But if they were applying for a grant, they would have all that together. Right? I mean,
I think that probably would depend on each grant.
okay. I think they would have prepared like a week in advance. Certainly submit it. I don't know, Josh,
I do a lot of grants. I wish I'd say it wasn't last minute, but it often it is.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but I thought we addressed that somehow. Let me see.
I know we talked about it. I'm not real certain where you addressed it. I think a lot of the information is going to already be provided in the grant award letter or the grant agreement that the council would be looking at when the request comes over to you. I think the time-consuming part may be when you go to look for, you know, the additional regulations such as in Comar, and, you know, the federal regulations. That may take a little bit more time.
And what about like the 6-month follow-up or the 3-month follow-up on how the grant is?
I didn't have that conversation with him.
Okay.
So I don't have any concerns there.
Okay. I know Michelle was doing that, then it kind of dwindled, but.
For the last 6 years, there's been a lot of discussion about the county having a full-time grant writer, but that has never come to fruition. And I think if we did have a full-time grant writer, they would be able to move these grants through quicker.
Yeah, that's not addressed in here, but
Right.
if the county did have a grant writer, I mean, it would be fine. I mean, you wouldn't have to change this.
Right, it wouldn't slow things
Yeah.
down is where I'm,
No.
where I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, we had provided in reference to this kind of need for prompt action, we have in there that, you know, they'll promptly furnish a copy of each application or proposal. So, I mean, that's, I think, getting at that. I mean, normally, to have a grant, you're either going to apply for it, or you're going to get something like they've gotten, for example, for these circuit court grants from the administrative office of the court saying, we want to give you some money. So, I mean, it's, normally, I would think you would have the basic documentation for the grant. Now, you might not have it when you apply for it, but it can certainly be specified in the application what it is and what it's going to be used for. So that would then short-circuit it that way. So
Yeah,
I
but
don't
if
know.
they don't use it for
I
that,
don't really
then-
see that the timing is that big of a problem. I think it's more imaginary than real.
Is there like a specific ask here?
What was the question?
Is there a specific ask here? I mean, what are we trying to lead to?
Yeah, was this your idea for this legislation, Mr.
Well, I
Taylor?
think somebody wanted it revised and to
Yeah,
take a look
who's
at it.
somebody?
Yes.
Who did?
I honestly can't remember at this point.
Was it Unico?
Yeah.
No.
I think Laura and I talked about it in particular, yeah.
Any discussion?
Just more oversight, so we can keep track of things. It don't help any, but as long as we don't get the information.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest putting it in the form of a legislative bill, bringing back in for first reading, and if there's any further, you know, desire to change anything in it, change it.
Well, many of these bills, the only time we see them is when they drop them on our desk and say, we need to get this approved.
You're talking about the grants now, when you say
Yeah,
bill.
what did I
Yeah,
say?
Right.
Yeah, grants, what I was talking about.
I mean, it's gonna be hard to stop anything like that. I mean, we could put something in here like, well, we won't approve a grant for X days after it's submitted, but as soon as you do that, there's gonna be some essential grant that you don't want to adhere to that. And if you do want more time for grants, you can always say, you know, we're gonna discuss this at a work session before we approve it. So I think that it would be best to handle that on a case-by-case basis rather than trying to do it through legislative language.
Okay.
So if we wanted to do if we wanted to do a 3-month follow-up for them to give us the outcomes, tracking outcomes, we could write that into the legislative bill.
Well, I think, and I'll go
Or is
through
that
the.
a policy
I'll go
thing?
through the language just to make absolutely
Okay.
sure, but I think Laura thinks too that we have in there that you can impose conditions.
Okay.
And I think that would be better, again, on a case-by-case basis than doing it in legislative language, because of what I said before, that a lot of the grants are just kind of for somebody's salary or something like that. And I mean, do you really want to have a 3-month follow-up on that? As opposed to something that might be more significant that they're going to use it for, some project. I can remember we had a fair amount of discussion about the, what was it, Pirates Wharf? That would be an example of the other kind, where you might want to know something about it. But if you have a grant, for example, the ones we did today, for the adult drug court and the family services, I mean, they're mostly things that are done by the circuit court, and I mean, if you want to have follow-up, you could certainly ask them. I'm sure they'd be glad to tell you, but it seems to me that it's just kind of make work on something like that. But if you want to put that in as a condition when you approve those grants, you could do it. I mean, does that kind of cover it? I mean, if you have the ability to do it.
I'm just thinking we need to have like a policy on how
Well,
we approve grants, how we follow up with them.
If you ever attend any of the Board of Ed meetings, their grant writer attends every meeting and gives them an update of all the grants that they've accepted and all the grants that they've, that are pending, all the grants that they've applied for. And it's a substantial amount of money, and it pays for the position. So I personally think we're long overdue for a grant writer, and I think that position would be essential, and then they could come in front of us and give us an update on all the grants. That way we know what money's out there.
You really don't need a grant writer to do that. It's just instructions that anybody that's writing grants sends a follow-up to the council.
Yeah, I mean, they have them in each department.
Yeah.
Like, so Public Works has their own person who's doing the grants.
It'd be nice if they did that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if we pass legislation that said that we just want to know what grants were applied for, what grants were approved, how the money's going to be spent.
Yeah. Were the outcomes met?
Like I said,
Were
it'd be
they-
nice if they did that.
Yeah.
It may be too that the Board of Ed, a lot of their grants are state money coming from the feds.
Federal money.
Where there are an awful lot of Code of Federal Regulations or COMAR regulations that you really need to be
Is that a policy?
pretty conversant with, whereas a good many of our grants are just kind of, as I say, maybe rote isn't the word, but there's not as much bureaucratic mumbo jumbo associated with them.
I think we could apply for the same grants. Okay. Anything else? All right, moving on. Next on the agenda is a letter of support for the Habitat for Humanity. Ms. Ackley, would you like to discuss that? Aren't you on the board?
I'm the president, yeah. So I don't know, should I not be speaking about it?
What's that?
Should I not be speaking about it since I'm the
No, you're
president?
fine.
It's just a letter of recommendation. You know more about it than I do.
Say, I don't have glasses on.
I'm okay with it.
Right, I'm
Yeah.
fine, I'm fine.
Everybody okay with
I can't
it?
read it, I don't have glasses.
Right, yeah,
It's in the brief book, so
Right,
everybody's
we've all read
seen it.
Yes.
yeah.
All right,
I'm good with
Good
it.
job.
Yeah, well done.
good job, thank you. Moving on. All right, need a motion to go in closed work session.
So moved.
Any opposed? Nay. All right, we move to closed work session.
Can I have like 2 seconds to run downstairs?
You can take a break if you want.
Okay.